You're listening to How I See It, hosted by Han. You guessed it, that's me. I am here to motivate and inspire you with guests from all different industries and backgrounds. So get ready for personal stories of success, of growth, full of highs and lows, and of course, unapologetic realness. This is How I See It. Okay, you guys, I am so excited. I have Lyon here today. She is a coach, nervous system-led mentor, founder of Modern Mind, which you guys have probably seen on Instagram, or someone has probably shared a graphic recently and you had no idea where it came from, and it was Amber's, and author of You Are a Magnet, which I'm so excited about because last time I had her on the podcast, her book wasn't out yet. So welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited. It's so nice to see you in person.
I know.
We were chatting about this transition from digital to reality and being able to be like, oh my God, I get to hug you now. So.
I know. I literally just went and grabbed Amber downstairs and I gave her a big hug, and then I realized like, oh my God, we've never actually met in person. I maybe should have not ran up for a hug, but.
Right, so you come in, I'm like, yes, here's Hannah.
So I read your book.
Oh my
so
gosh,
fucking good. I'm so proud to have interviewed you before it came out and just like be in your ether. It was so fabulous. It was so good. I know you came on and we had like a really vulnerable conversation probably like a year and a half ago now, which is insane. If you could jump in a little bit into like how you kind of got from where you started to now this book that I have with us right here in front of us.
It's so funny because it came out in June of last year. So yeah, we spoke right before that.
Yeah.
And it almost has a life of its own now. So when I see it anywhere, I'm like, oh, there you are. It's almost like a child, something living outside of myself. But absolutely, as far as, kind of reintroducing myself to the people that were around a year and a half ago on the pod, but also to your new listeners and new audience that are in this space. With the book, it was a seed that was planted a long time ago. I sort of always had this dream, this intention of wanting to share a message with the world. And I suppose going beyond just a message, it was wanting to alleviate some pain in life.
Yeah.
And I think clearly we all experience pain, and I saw so much pain in my own experience that it really seeded, or I suppose planted, the intention to want to create impact for others when I wasn't able to do that for myself in my home environment. Going back in time, kind of taking you to the origin of, where even the seed to help other people came from was really childhood upbringing. My father was addicted to methamphetamine, was in and out of gangs. There was a lot of crime. We were in witness protection at one point in time. I mean, I was raised by several different caregivers, changing of hands, given up for adoption. It was tumultuous, to say the least.
Yeah.
And I think it really imprinted upon me, I think, just how much someone's emotional pain and turmoil can create consequences for the people around them. And for anyone listening that loves someone that's been going through a really difficult time or struggling with a lot, you feel helpless.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And especially as a child, I wasn't able to help him. If anything, I needed his help. I needed his guidance. I needed that father archetype in my life. And that looked like many kind of stages of grief and processing of who he could have been, who I wanted him to be, and ultimately led me to, well, let me just accept things as they are. And what has that informed me of? What has that ignited within me to want to serve, to want to help somebody else not reach that place, whether it be, the equivalent to the child that I was that was feeling helpless in that situation, or if I could help someone like my father who was lost, who was stuck in the pursuit of constantly wanting external achievements to supplement an internal feeling of lack. So that's led me to this place, and really the book and the page, which was the origin of the book, getting out my thoughts and wanting to share tools that actually work for people.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is so incredibly heavy. I grew up in a very chaotic household in a different way, very like emotionally abusive. And I feel like I had to like really grieve the parents and the family dynamic and the childhood I wish I could have had. And I think that in its own is like a huge, like long-term grieving process, like to begin with, because you have to kind of accept and move forward. And I remember in our last conversation we talked about like the victim mentality that we can stay in, and I think this is like a version of that, where the wishing and hoping and not being able to accept the situation we had. And I think it takes time. How did you start to process that in your own journey?
So, to your point, it's like this expectation. And my path, it was panic attacks. I eventually got sent to prison, and I reached this point where it was, it was really dark. I was questioning whether or not I wanted to be in the planet anymore.
Yeah.
There was such pain in that experience, and I think a feeling of helplessness, right? At the root of victimization is feeling like there's nothing I can do to change this. And by the grace of life, source, God, right? Whatever you want to call it, there was something that invited me to turn within and say, well, what if that wasn't true? What if I wasn't helpless? What if there were things that I could do, that I could be in control over or to influence for things to start changing for me? And that led me to meditation as a first instance practice that allowed me to be still enough to create space between those vicious thoughts that were telling me, I wasn't able, or I wasn't worthy of change, or I wasn't deserving of feeling good, or all of those narratives that we experience when we're in those darker places in life. And it allowed me to step back and say, is that really me? Are those thoughts really who I am, or am I more than that? And that led me down this path, right? I started to notice that meditation obviously helped me feel better, it helped me become more discerning as far as the wild dogs or horses of my mind and where they were taking me, and starting to create more order, right? Using my mind as a vehicle to get what I want done versus taking me away from it.
Yeah.
And encouraging me not to go do the new thing or start down the new process, which you of all people, you're living, breathing evidence of someone that's walked through those doubts that I'm sure your mind.
Oh yeah. It's so dark. We have such a similar story, and I think that's why we connected so well, because I remember that moment too. You almost, when you grow up in the environment like this, you think that there's no other option, because of course that's like all you know. And I think for me, it had gotten to a point where I was just like, it can't be this. And I faced, the same thing, or not to be so dark, but it's like, I was like, well, it can't get much worse than this. So, and I think once you do start pushing and pursuing more in this way, and you start actually reteaching yourself that no, this happened to me, this was my environment, but I'm an adult now. And I have the power to rewrite some of this stuff. I would love for you to get into kind of how we can rewire these things, what you talk about in the book, and how we can essentially attract the life we want. What is magnetism?
And thank you for sharing that, by the way. I think that's so beautiful, for anyone listening. And I think when you've been in that dark place, you kind of get to the other side, you find the light, and you grab a torch and you want to go back, and you want to find people that may also be stuck trying to find their way out of that. So with the book, I really tried to structure it in a way that would meet someone where they were, right? Kind of that concept of going back with the torch. That's why we start with alchemizing fear, right? We're kind of we're in that place of fear. We're in that place of doubting ourselves. We're in that place of not taking action because we're believing the thoughts. Ultimately, it ties really heavily into what we feel safe to pursue and regulating our nervous system and whatnot. And that's why there's so many practices in the book. Each guiding principle leads you to a practical implementation of what that looks like. Because I'm sure, as you found, I love self-help books, I love, personal development books, but sometimes it feels really good when you're reading it, and then you go out into your life and it's kind of this polarity, right? It's
you don't integrate.
Totally. How do I live these principles? How do I actually, integrate truthfully? And I think there's this duality of do I go into the mountains and I am a monk, or do I live in New York City and I'm kind of an asshole, right? So where do we live on that spectrum, Magnetism, where that ties into it, is sort of the opposite of victimization, right? We have the victim that's I can't control anything. And magnetism is, I am the source of creating everything, right? There's this radical responsibility. And with that is there can at times be confrontation within ourselves, you know what I mean? And I'm of the, spiritual standpoint that we're co-creating, we're co-facilitating the things that we're experiencing in our lives. So, there's sort of this caveat that I always add in there. But in what way can we take more radical responsibility for our lives? And magnetism, the word itself is so symbolic of what it really means, which is I am the source, and I am radiating things towards myself that affirm the energy that I'm occupying, versus, the way in which we go out in the world is sort of this Newtonian physics, I suppose, approach is really, I do X, therefore Y, which makes sense, right? That's the way that we've been educated and the way that we've been taught the world works. But what if it wasn't a result of your productivity? What if it wasn't all just effort? What if it was also the intentionality that you were bringing into a situation that was aiding, or at times, creating more resistance in a circumstance that has very little to do with the level of effort or the level of care that you're bringing into something.
Yeah. A lot of people look at like pursuing healing or going on their healing journey is like sitting with a therapist or someone and talking about everything that's happened to them. Like, I needed it. I needed someone to sit and like hear me and like validate my experience, because I didn't have that. But then it like hits a point where like we said, you have to integrate. And I think one of the hardest parts and like the true change you see in your life is when you can actually like change your thoughts and like change or ignore them. I'll say ignore them and do something different, because I feel like I still am at a place. I've been working on this for like over 6 years now. There's still thoughts that pop up that are just completely untrue, and I have to ignore them. But being able to ignore them and choose something different is the hardest part of what you're talking about. You write in the book, when you acknowledge that your thoughts are observations rather than accurate reflections of reality, you leave just enough room to question them and choose new ones. Can you please get into how you did this and how you coach others to do this?
Absolutely. And I think it ties into the conversation around meditation, which is sort of putting that into practice. But I always like to see meditation as a tool. I don't think our intention in life is to sit on a meditation pillow and just be in that beautiful higher consciousness state, right? How do we integrate that into our day-to-day? So meditation as a first instance is an opportunity to close down your eyes and turn your gaze within. And notice what you see, notice what you hear, and just be with that, right? That's when we step into that role of observation. It's almost like we're watching a movie. We get to see the chaos that is our mind. And I have a lot of clients that are like, oh, I'm afraid of that stillness. Like when I close down my eyes, it's like all the things that I'm thinking are coming up. I'm like, well, welcome to what's happening when you're not actually just aware of what's happening. And we go about our lives and we sort of fear the stillness, but you're carrying it all anyway. It's all happening anyway, subconsciously. So why not bring awareness to it so we can actually change it? Yeah. So, and to that point, awareness is the key to change. If we're not aware of something, we can't actually change, and we don't have that empowerment to. So meditation is first practice, whether that be self-led, whether that be, going onto YouTube. There are many resources out there that people can tap into. This has been around for thousands of years for a reason, right? It's tried and true. But then also, how can we integrate that into our day-to-day? And one of my favorite practices with clients is getting them to be more aware when they're going on a walk. So when you normally would be walking in the park with your dog or walking to work, and we're kind of like, okay, when's the meeting? Okay, I'm going to be doing this. Or, we're way out ahead of where we are. How can we come back home to the present moment and just observe our surroundings? We're building a muscle in those moments where we start to just be with things. We don't need to judge them. We're not trying to change them. We're not trying to control them, but we're bringing our conscious awareness to them. And that helps us integrate that practice into our mind as well. So think of it like a living, breathing meditation when you're doing this on a walk, especially doing something you normally would do really unconsciously, right? Maybe it's when you get in the car and you close the car door and you take a moment. Maybe it's when you're having lunch and you have a sip of water. That's your cue. But give yourself an opportunity to return to this present moment. That's one of my favorite tasks to integrate as far as rituals and routines. Yeah.
A lot of the way we live is not aligned with like our authentic desires. And I think like for me, like this practice, what you're talking about was like the first step in realizing my knee-jerk reaction, like the way like my brain worked, the thoughts that I had, the reactions I had were not aligned with like my true authenticity and desires, even though that concept was really confusing. Because if I want to react this way, if like I'm choosing these things, like why would that not be aligned with my authentic desire? And I think that gets really, really confusing for people. powerful.
Completely. I mean, it's so accurate what you're talking about, and same, right? It's this confronting thing of how I've been being and how I've been operating in the world is actually not who I am. It's how I've been trained to operate. And this is really the spiritual journey, right? Is discovering what is mine and what is not mine of what I've experienced in the past. And I always love to draw on the analogy of programming, right? It's almost like the programming of your computer has been set up in a certain way. And we can either leave that on autopilot, or we can step in and make the tweaks and adjustments that we see fit, right? And I think those knee-jerk reactions are very tied to our nervous system response. It's what we've been primed to behave or respond with in certain events. And it takes effort, and it's a sticky sort of process to integrate new responses to old ways of being or old situations that arise, because we're essentially trying to learn a new skill. It's like learning a new language, right? It's the same thing that's happening.
Well, and to the point of the book, I think like this is the second step in your, what do you call it, the pillars?
Well, it's really the framework, which is alchemizing fear, cultivating courage, the magnetic mindset, and then living through joy.
So the second pillar, the cultivating courage, I think that's where this comes in, because it takes absolute audacious courage to be able to do this. That is like the hardest part, like being able to make choices that in your head feel like they go against everything you want to do for the sake of what you know, whether that's like saying goodbye to a partner that you know is bad for you, or making a different choice in like a heated situation. Easy example, like I used to just immediately react and like become like very angry, loud, want to fight, because I grew up in that kind of situation. And so to me, like it started where you did. I want to live a peaceful life, yet I pop off every single time someone breathes the wrong way. Like that does not align. And I'm really proud, because I feel like I have that thought now, but it's gotten quieter and I don't want to do that anymore. But at first it's like, why would I not do this? This is normal. I don't even think about it. But then like all my relationships go to shit. I think it's having enough courage to like in those moments make a choice that feels like it violates who you think you are, but you know deep down you aren't, because you're unhappy.
To your point, you're always choosing. Maybe you're choosing unconsciously. Maybe you're choosing reflexively, but there's still a choice. And so I think it's about making the choice oftentimes that takes us into an unknown versus the known. And that's why there's so much resistance that comes up into that. We have this known response. It's this muscle. It's almost, the analogy I use with clients is almost like there's the riverbed, right? Which makes the river just so easy to flow in that direction. It's like there's less resistance, even though it's creating outcomes that we don't want in life. And I think it really comes down to being our own investigator, right? Can you be your own Sherlock Holmes and take inventory of what patterns you're experiencing? And then looking at the ways in which, how am I co-creating or co-facilitating these patterns in my life? What's contributing to these outcomes that I may not want to experience any more of? Right? I certainly had that moment myself. I think about my early 20s, sort of raw dogging my programming.
No, for sure. I was so chaotic. Like, I'm so thankful that there's only like one or two people who like are in my life that knew me at that point now.
They're the lifers.
You talk about becoming aware of the magnetic field. And I feel like this relates, because when you get to this point where you've like made the choice that you want to show up courageously, and you're practicing and putting to the test these things that we know we have to do, and you're not perfect, of course. I mess up all the time. It's just you get better and better over time at being uncomfortable in your head, and then it starts to feel slightly better. How can we embrace and honestly enhance our power with this magnetic field?
I love this question so much. And, you know, I have practices with clients like aura amplification meditations and really tapping into that. But again, where it always starts is being aware that you have this aura around you. You have energy around you. You have your beautiful energy around you right now. I have my energy around me, right? And so they're influencing each other, right? Where your energy is going to affect my energy and vice versa, especially if we don't have sort of energetic boundaries in place and what that looks like. And so when we're thinking about this whole magnetic field and sort of what energy we're radiating around, it's comprised of how you're thinking, how you're feeling, and how you're behaving. right? And that's then influencing the energy that's radiating from you. And that really ties into what we're believing to be true in any given moment. So when we're believing disempowering thoughts, it changes our energy. That shift in energy then changes the outcomes, changes the experiences that we're radiating into our lives. And so if I go into a situation, a social event, and I'm feeling like, oh, this is not going to go well, why am I going to this? Oh my gosh, that's going to shape the way that people are interacting with me, and also shape the way that I'm showing up into that experience, right? So what outcomes are going to follow as a result of what I'm thinking, feeling, believing, and behaving in that given moment, which is affecting my energy. And so being aware, wow, what am I thinking right now? What am I believing to be true right now? How am I behaving, right? And starting to take inventory of what's happening internally is going to help you become more conscious of what's happening in your energy. When we think about amplification practices, that's getting to know your own energy again. Practices like meditation, really becoming aware of what feels good for you, what doesn't feel good for you. When you're taking care of yourself, your energy starts to radiate in a different way because it thrives. You're like literally a house plant.
Yeah.
Right? Are you taking care of your house plant, right? Sometimes I'll have people step into my coaching container that have not been watering their plant, right? They have not been nourishing that soil. They have not been making sure that it gets the right sunlight that it needs. Don't put this pressure on yourself to be super magnetic and confident out of nowhere. If you need to actually tend to yourself, tend to your energy, start taking better care of you. Nourishment, right? What are you eating? How are you moving your body? Are you treating yourself like someone that you care about? And, treat yourself like a houseplant, like in that way.
Right, like we've been taught to wait for external cues for internal pursuits. But the truth is we have to pursue whatever we feel called to before we have the invitation. And I think you can apply that to like pursuing the business, pursuing the relationship. What we're talking about, like pursuing growth, we've had it backwards that like our mood and our energy and our mental health should be dependent on what's happening around us, instead of we can actually change what's happening around us with our mood and with rewiring our thoughts and the way we see ourselves and these self-limiting beliefs.
And in fact, the only reason you've ever wanted anything is to change the way you feel. Right? So why wait? That's sort of the method of magnetism, is why are you waiting for that experience? Why are you holding your happiness, your feeling of confidence, your feeling of abundance for that particular circumstance? What if you gave that to yourself now? And what doors would that feeling then open for you as a result? And that particular quote really ties into wanting to create things in life, right? Especially businesses, relationships, opportunities. I'm sure you didn't have someone kind of swoop through your window and say, hey, do you want to start a podcast? Here are all the resources to do so, right?
That'd be lovely.
Yeah, it would be amazing.
Well, we have ChatGPT now, so it's making it easier.
ChatGPT is our savior. Yeah,
I know. It's crazy. I'm like side note, I'm like, it's absolutely insane. Like, no one has an excuse anymore not to execute, which I think is the point. Like, it's like you could have all the resources. Our self-limiting beliefs will keep us from even typing into ChatGPT, what do I need to start a podcast?
Completely. And I actually love Tony Robbins on the whole conversation around resources, as it's not a lack of resources, it's a lack of resourcefulness. And so how are you using the ingredients that you already have in your kitchen? I have, again, a lot of clients will come in, I'm like, I want the cake, I want the cake, I want the cake. Supplement cake for whatever it is that you want in your life right now. And my process as a coach is to go into their, spiritual kitchen, their life with them, and say, well, hey, you have the flour over here and the sugar's over there and you have the measuring cups here. So what's stopping you from putting it together, right? We so often just want the end result, but we're not willing to participate in the becoming, participate in the process of creating it. And I think when we think about this concept of permission, so we're so, conditioned to believe that someone has to swoop in and say, hey, you're good, go do it. You have to tell yourself that you're good. You have to give that validation to yourself, that permission to yourself to walk that path. And I'm curious for you even, did you feel like you ever had to wait for permission to pursue things? And how did you give that permission to yourself?
I think that, and I know you can probably relate to this, like when you're so low, if you find something that brings hope or that's going to like heal your inner child, it like drives you to execute. So I think for the podcast and like what I do online and like the mission, like I didn't feel that, but I feel like for my own healing, like I just wanted someone to save me. Like I wanted someone to do the hard work for me. I wanted someone to take care of me. I didn't want to have to like do the hard work myself, rewire the beliefs, like show up for myself. Like I thought that someone could show up for me. There was a lot of resistance. I love this quote, so I have to read it. But you talk about how taking action requires us to question the illusion of our resistance. You talk about how there's this illusion that we can't overcome, or we can't execute, or we are not capable of. And I think it's the same thing that was happening to me. It was like, well, I can't ever feel peace. Like I can't ever feel happy. Like that doesn't make sense. Like I can't ever trust, because like this is what my life has been. It was a point where it's like, why am I resisting this? And I think we all have resistance.
Completely, everyone, right? And resistance is just the cusp of our comfort zone, right? And rubbing up against that. And it's the known versus the unknown. And when we're thinking about resistance, you know, any quote unquote negative behavior or thought pattern always has a positive intention. And so when we think about resistance or self-sabotaging even, it's like we almost kind of think of it as this benevolent force that's coming in to like punish us or take away the good. Really, it's just the part of you, and I always love to kind of refer to this part as an overbearing mother that's scared, she's nervous, how is this going to go for you? I don't know about this, right? It's that voice that's coming in. And sometimes it's a little more vicious and critical, and sometimes it's a little more soft and nurturing.
What we're resisting is, of course, like what we want most.
Yep.
Which is just like, you know, fucked up.
Totally. And
for lack of a better word.
And it kind of feels like this paradox, right? Because why am I resisting the thing that I want? Because it requires us to face the parts of us that are in resistance to it. I always love to, you know, and anyone in this conversation, you probably have gathered this so far, it's kind of my style. I love analogies and the visualization of energetics. But you are a sun, or I like to use the analogy of a lamp, right? But over time, there have been things that have layered upon you. It's not that you're not radiating. It's not that you can't have all the good that you're seeking. It's just that there are things between you and that which you seek. And our job, our spiritual path, our spiritual journey is to reveal what those things are, where they come from, and how can we integrate them and release them lovingly, right? And integration being a key part of that. We're not trying to avoid, we're not trying to deny, we're not trying to push it down deeper, but we're actually just trying to look it in the eye and say, I see you, I hear you, you're part of me, but how can I walk forward anyway?
Yeah. How do you help clients, and how in your own journey too did you fight against like the resistance to get vulnerable and trust and rewire these beliefs? Because again, like it's the fear, of course, like we have to alchemize it, but also the courage, building the courage, and now integration. But like, what were some of those steps? And I think one of them is time too.
Completely. It's so funny because, you know, you see that quote, time heals all wounds.
Yeah.
Like, man, sometimes it doesn't. Like, I've met a lot of like bitter old people, I'm not going to be totally honest with you, that still have grudges and are still on their same conditions and their same patterning, right? I work from people that are 21 to in their late 70s. So I see this sort of spectrum of the human experience in a beautiful way. And when I think about resistance, particularly with vulnerability, right, I think when we've had to play a certain role in our childhoods to receive love, what was safe for us to be in order to receive the love that we needed as children, quite often that can manifest as perfectionism and only allowing certain parts, the strong part, right, the capable part, the intelligent part, you know, the performer, whatever that looks like. But what about the part that's nervous? What about the part that's feeling afraid? What about the part that's feeling like she really needs support or he really needs support in this moment? And was there room for that part of you? And then was there room for imperfection? In my own journey, there wasn't. Absolutely not. And that was a path of really learning to get comfortable and doing it in safe environments first. You know, I think therapy is a wonderful resource for this reason. Safe friendships, right? Starting to own things that are true for you that perhaps you haven't shared with other people. Making sure, again, you're choosing someone that's safe in order to share those truths. But so often, it's like these great moments of discomfort that are our breakthroughs. And we've been taught that we want to avoid discomfort, emotional pain, right? It's like, oh, I'm just going to, you know, kind of avoid that situation or that conversation because it's uncomfortable. But connection awaits for you on the other side, right? And that level of connection that you allow for yourself and allow in your relationships, that's shaping the quality of your life. You know, there are so many studies that are out there now to say and to prove, you know, I think it's around 90% of your happiness on a day-to-day basis or in life is comprised of just the quality of the relationships that you have. And so in what ways can you start to weigh in this argument of, well, what am I sacrificing by being unwilling to face the discomfort of what this resistance is around? And, maybe right now it feels like the easy choice, but in the long run, it's actually costing me a hell of a lot more than I'm willing to pay. And I love this conversation around leveraging pain. One of the ways in which we avoid doing things that we know we want to do is we kind of put pain in the past, or we put pain in the future.
Yeah.
But we don't allow ourselves to feel that pain in this present moment. And, if there's something that the listener, or even for yourself, you're resisting at the moment, I always love to introduce a visualization where we fast forward in 5 years from now. What does life look like as a result of not implementing that new habit, or not pursuing that project that you're talking about, or not changing that negative behavior? Now let's go 10 years into the future. Now let's go 20 years into the future. And what is the actual cost that you're paying right now as a result of not implementing?
That's so good. I think that, you've listened to the pod, you've been on, I very much believe in getting uncomfortable for the sake of real comfortability. And I think you're making such a beautiful point about choice and choosing to live a certain way and choosing to live a joyful life. And I think to do that, you can't have a happy, joyful life without choosing the pain. And I think it's a continual choice. It's not something that you can just, to your point, go to therapy, you listen, you know what's happening, and then you keep moving forward in the hopes that the switch is just gonna flip. You have to choose every single day. And again, back to the book, that takes courage. How do you cultivate courage?
Courage is not the absence of fear, but courage is action despite of fear, or carrying fear with you, right?
Yeah.
Kind of fear is the little kid in the back of the car. It's still there, right? But it's just not driving the car. Thank God, right? We don't want fear to drive the car anymore of your life. And so, in little ways, I always love, in very little ways, introducing little moments of discomfort. Maybe it's a small habit not drinking 7 cups of coffee, or something like this that you already know intuitively your body is saying to you, hey, this is not good for me. Or it's something, hey, this would be really good for me. How can you start with that? Facing that discomfort of change, and then slowly building into that. With clients, we always begin by not overwhelming the system, because again, that can so quickly manifest as perfectionism. If you were the person and you're listening and you're like, oh, I just want to do all at once, and it's kind of this total life overhaul, right? And okay, but why? Why do you feel the need to change everything? And how can we just focus on the small, sustainable changes that can be made? So small, bite-sized chunks of discomfort, and then work your way up to the bigger things to build that skill set.
I think it's also where people really, really struggle is that they don't trust themselves, so they can't trust the unfolding of their life. Because it's a way that we can, and I know you know this, wow, because we're so similar. It's you want to control everything because of the lack control you had, and also if you control everything, then you can foresee everything bad that's going to happen. But then the trust in ourselves is missing, and so then we can't trust our life, therefore we can't live a joyful life because we're so hyper vigilant. What do you bring it back to in the book? How can we choose to live a joyful life and choose to trust ourselves?
How do you trust anyone in your life? How do you learn to trust them?
I always tell people trust is earned. It's not given out for free. And I think experience, you have to keep putting yourself on the line. When you've had evidence of something negative for so long, of course, that's all I know. Of course, that's normal because it's all I've seen, and I can't expect trust to grow in different ways if I don't create room for evidence to be collected.
The nuance of the conversation is really, how do I rebuild trust?
Yeah.
Because at one point and another, we did trust ourselves, right? Even if it was when we were 11 or 12 years old, there was that sense of trust. And at some point along the way, we lose that trust. Maybe life unfolded in a certain way, or maybe something happened that then, we abandoned ourselves. And so we're trying to wonder, what's that relationship look like now? But to your point, we start to have more experiences with it. And it's no different to the relationship that we have with ourselves. I think we see this, I am me, and so it becomes murky. It's well, you're in a relationship with yourself just as you are with a partner or with a friendship or with your relationship with money. It all ties into what is the quality of that relationship. And so how can you spend more time with yourself? How can you invest in yourself? How can you start trusting yourself on the little things? Again, starting small. And sometimes I get frustrated by sometimes how simple some of these practices are, but the beauty of it is it's free, it's available to you right now in this moment, and there's no reason that you can't do it, right?
Yeah.
There's no reason you can't keep a simple promise to yourself. And as you wouldn't trust, someone that had there was some mistrust in the past with your life or something really important off the bat, how can we start small as well with those simple promises? And when we're thinking about joy is really the choice, right? It's an energy that we bring into our day, and I find that it's almost impossible to be present and not in some form of joy, right?
Yeah,
because if we're not present, it's almost impossible to be tapped into joy, because it invites us into life. It invites us into participation with what's unfolding. And so all of these modalities and all of this, kind of conversation really ties back to what is the quality of the relationship that you have with yourself, and also what is the quality of the relationship you have with your life? Are you present with your life? Do you pay attention? Do you listen? Or are you just kind of using it as a means to an end?
Yeah. And also, like, what kind of commitment do you have to yourself? I think, like, for me, like, self-love has always been really hard. There always has been, like, an element of, like, self-hatred and, like, not treating myself right, not going for the right people. Okay, well, if I can't fully love myself right now, I can at least show myself love by fully committing to myself. And I think that commitment to, like, showing up every day and, like, choosing peace and, like, choosing joy and choosing to rewire, I think over time has gotten me to a place where I'm like, okay, like, I am in a place of self-love. Like, I've been showing myself self-love this entire time because I have a commitment to actually align with my desires and authenticity, even though that wasn't my knee-jerk reaction.
So funny, when we're in relationship or with a friend that we've been, friends with for years, or with a parent, we don't constantly asking, like, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? It's like, no, I know you do, because of the way that you behave and the way that you show up in our relationship. And so to your point, these years of really showing up for yourself, like, that really is love for so many of us. Sometimes, again, investigating your love language and whatnot. I am a words of affirmation girly and an acts of service, so my partner is not words of affirmation, so
it's always like that. It's always like that. I'm words of affirmation too, because I never got it.
Totally.
And then you always end up going for people romantically that is not it at all. And you're like, of course.
Then, what a beautiful way to inform someone of how to love you in a way that, like, you receive it. And I think it kind of ties back into that part around discomfort of, it didn't feel good. Now it's, come into a reflexive response, but it didn't feel good to have to ask him. I always used to think with relationships, like, I shouldn't have to ask. And, like, there are some things, right?
Yeah, no, you have to teach people. And I think it's also, too, a challenge to, like, soothe your own anxiety. Look at things that have happened, like, prove to yourself that things are true without needing to see it. Because I think that's something that, like, when you struggle to surrender and you struggle with control, like, you almost need this, like, hyper vigilant affirmation that everything's going to be okay. Being able to, like, sit in the uncomfortability of my own anxiety has allowed me to, like, persevere through the uncomfortable of those types of situations, whether it's a relationship or business or whatever it is.
I love that. And, there's such space in that. And it reminds me of sort of this, if there was a child that was having a tantrum or a meltdown in front of you, you're not going to be like, shut up and get in the car, right? But that's how we talk to ourselves sometimes. It's like, this isn't a really big deal. You shouldn't be worried about this. Like, that energy is kind of like this shutting down versus what you're talking about, which is, hey, let's look at the data.
Yeah.
Let's sit with this. Let's investigate this. But also let's provide some additional light and some additional clarity. That's you quite literally reparenting yourself in that moment.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on and having such a vulnerable conversation with me per usual. I'm like, we'll just have a thing where you come on every season and we shoot the shit. But I should have listened to what you said last time. So, like, looking back at your journey, the book is now out officially for almost a year. You're going through your own healing. You've come so far. I'm sure it's like, the healing journey never stops. But how do you see it? How do you see it all?
An adventure. I think my motto is, like, how can I dance with my life? And, part of that is, like, this deep surrender of not needing to know what the next move is.
Yeah.
Right? Because otherwise it takes you out of the experience. And sometimes I'm tired, I'm still dancing. Sometimes I'm joyous, I'm still dancing. But I always just want to keep this sort of motion where I'm flowing with my life. And it's been everything in between so far, and I'm sure it'll be everything in between to continue, but I'm incredibly proud of the transition. I'm proud of the integration. I'm proud of the healing, the book, you know, and what's to come in this next chapter, as you should be. You know, it's such a beautiful thing to have a platform where you're bringing so much light and love to other people, so it's an honor to be here in that.
It's always an honor. Thank you. Please share where people can follow you, where people can find the book. I'll put it in the show notes too, but just share before we go.
So I'm at Modern Mind on Instagram and modernmind.earth, which I love that I have that domain. People are like, what? .earth? I'm like,
I love it.
Planet Earth, my friend. And the book is You Are a Magnet, which is available anywhere you can buy books.
Yay. Thank you so much, Amber.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I hope you leave here feeling motivated and inspired. Do not forget to rate and review the pod on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and don't forget to follow How I See It Pod so you can keep up with podcast updates and see who's coming on next. And if you're not already, come join the fam and follow at How Han Sees It. Thank you guys.